Hola and welcome to Power and Perspective, where we reframe conversations with empathy and humor. Here we are on Wacky Wednesday. Is
Nice
that what
rolling
we're
with it.
going with? Yeah, thanks. I was like waxadaisical. Wait, that's not a word. We're talking about gun ownership. We've been waiting for this one for a long time, and it's very exciting that we have a guest too. Welcome, Rick. Thank you for joining us. Oh, I forgot to say who we are. This is Rick. I am April. And this is Aaron. I'm on today. I told you it's Wacky Wednesday. Oh, gun ownership. So I would say my perspective on gun ownership is that it is in the Constitution for a reason, that we have the right to bear arms. So I think that we should be allowed to own guns. I also think guns don't kill people, people kill people. And I also think that the people who are shooting people probably don't necessarily care about any gun laws you make. Just a thought. So that is my overall general view on gun ownership. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Well, I feel uncomfortable being the more moderate side of everything that you
What?
just said. Um, I mean I think mental health is not enough of focus in the country, and
Oh,
that being a big problem for everything. But
but I don't think it has to do with gun ownership.
pretty much.
Oh,
No,
I'll
yeah,
be
but pretty
quiet,
much
sorry.
it's pretty much I agree. As far as like if you look at even the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton talking about rising up against tyranny, the states rising up against tyranny, against the federal government, and all the concerns about a strong centralized federal state, and the potential issues with that. I don't necessarily think that the way that we talk about gun laws is it even involves that kind of argument, but people bring it up, so I'll agree with you to some extent there. But we didn't really have guns in the house too much. You remember Mom getting mad at Dad for having the one rifle, and I don't even remember what it was before he got rid of it.
I don't remember that, but I know Mom has guns now.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But anyway, yeah, we're the ignorant ones here.
Yeah, I was in the military, so I've
Oh, yeah.
shot weapons.
Big stuff.
That's what I can say. AR-16s and bazooka. Shot a bazooka once. Threw some grenades. Not at people. Could I shoot someone if someone was attacking me? That's very hard to say. That's why I don't have a gun, because I feel like I would be the person that would end up shooting myself. That's what I feel like.
Practice.
Like you're wrestling around with it, and then you're like, oh, oops.
Oh, it's a movie gunfight.
Yes.
Where you're fighting with somebody like face to face, hand to hand, and you have a gun.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, they attacked me, and then they point the gun at me, and I'm like, oh, it's like that, and they got the camera up really close here, and it's like, oh, like that. That's what would happen. This is why I do not own a gun. Also, I'm cheap, and they're expensive.
You should also stop watching movies.
Let's go to Rick. Let's go to the expert.
Yeah, so Rick, you're an avid hunter. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you grew up with guns, and what role they play in your life?
Well, I grew up in a household that was full of hunters. My grandmother was a hunter. My father and all my uncles were hunters. My dad's side and my mother's side as well. my mother hunted a little bit when I was younger, and then she stopped. But everyone else in the family has been avid hunters. We've owned hunting rifles. I've had, in fact, I hunt now on occasion with my old Model 70 Winchester with open sights, and I take great pride in getting a deer with that gun. So
That is
uh,
super cool.
I've also been brought up with the idea that these are extremely dangerous devices, and you have to be very, very careful. I taught my son to hunt, and I always told him uh, the first 10 laws of handling a gun are, you know, uh, it could go off at any time. So don't ever, always act like it's loaded. And that's the first 10 laws, just
Yeah.
repeat it over and over again. So
Totally.
I've been around a lot of who were pro and anti-gun, and I've always had pretty involved conversations with both groups. I think of myself as a equal middle of the roader. So
I love that. That is so great. I would say that the military also put a great respect for weapons in me, because when we're on the range, like it's always down range. You never point the weapon anywhere else, or you're doing like a bazillion push-ups. Like when you're marching in formation, the weapon always has to be pointed a certain direction. I was always scared as a jam. You like have to do these like things. It's been a while. Like you have to do these things if there's a jam, or they're like it could blow up in your face. I'm like, well, that's bad. So yeah, again, probably another reason why I don't have a weapon. I've gone out and shot weapons in the desert before. That's what we do here because we don't have animals. So instead of hunting, we shoot cans and rocks and stuff.
Refrigerators.
And yeah, refrigerators. I would say I have probably a healthy fear of weapons.
It sounds like you might have more than a healthy fear. Yeah, you might need to spend some more time. I mean, practice is practice. So the more time, the more you do it, the less you'll be afraid of it. It's just like flying and swimming with sharks and driving on the highway, all the things that can potentially be dangerous.
True that.
So
yeah,
I was curious, as somebody who grew up in a house without guns, what age do you kind of start with the education, as far as like what's like the right point, or what's too young maybe to start getting into gun safety and all that when you're around guns all the time?
Oh, we started as soon as we were aware. We were told don't touch the guns. That they were adult stuff. They could be dangerous. And finally, when I was probably about 12 years old, my dad took me out and started showing me how to shoot a 22. And by the time I was 14 or so, I think was the legal age at that point. I got my first hunting license and had been shooting rifles for a couple of years. And that first year or so, when I hunted, I always hunted with my father. And if I wasn't right next to him, he put me in one place and said, this is where you're going to hunt and don't move. So
are there any, and I might be skipping Aaron, so I apologize, because are there any proposed gun laws? Because I know Aaron says like there's not a lot to take all guns away, right? Like that would go against the Second Amendment. But are there any proposed gun laws that you've seen that you disagree with?
Yeah, there's a fair number of them out there. It's usually minor technical stuff. A lot of times they'll, for example, in some cases, if somebody does something, they'll take the guns away from them essentially forever, and they don't make any difference between whether it's an antique or your great grandfather's gun or some cheap 38 special you picked up on the street. In some places they will want to eliminate like all automatic weapons, and I'm not big on automatic or semi-automatic weapons.
Yeah.
And I think some of them have their place, but I also don't believe that you should run around in public with an AR-15 either. So
Yeah, I think
Not really
that's
useful.
an advocate's thing.
yeah,
I'm
they're fairly so.
Yeah.
If anything, the gun laws that sort of drive me crazy are the ones that make it easy for anybody and their brother to walk down the middle of the street, carrying essentially a full military outfit and not be arrested.
Yeah. And there was one law
and
my
I look
mom.
at it, if I took my car out in the street and
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just said
I
it was
think we're
to me,
behind.
right, claiming that you have the right to go out in the street with a 700 horsepower car that had no brakes and headlights or anything like that, because it's your right to have a car. So
Yeah. My mom told me there's a law that there used to be a law, but now marijuana is legal. But if you had a medical marijuana license, you couldn't get
concealed carry.
was it an open carry or
Concealed carry
any
permit.
concealed carry? You couldn't get a concealed carry permit. There are not a lot of high people I know going shooting anyone. First of all, that correlation's ridiculous. Not that I know a lot of high people, guys, but like that, I just can't not comprehend that correlation.
yeah, well, I think there's a lot of small dumb laws on the books.
That's true. That is very true. Yes.
And so to your point about walking out in public with an AR-15, I consider myself a liberty-oriented individual. I don't believe in political parties, but I often vote libertarian. But a lot of their arguments, and from a linguistic perspective, any gun laws are unconstitutional because of the way it's worded. Your rights shall not be infringed. But they do stuff like that, and I always struggle with it because it obviously it's completely asinine, like you were saying, to walk around in public with an AR-15 strapped to your chest. But at the same time, it seems like there's an effort to normalize that so that when people see people carrying guns, like to take us back to a point in our past, in our country's past, where if you saw somebody carrying a firearm, your immediate reaction was not abject terror, like it seems to be a lot of the times.
It was like normalized.
Yeah.
The problem is the history doesn't really support that, because if you go back into the 1800s and early 1900s, even out in the Wild West, very few people walked around openly carrying guns.
Yeah, in towns, yeah.
Really?
That's one of those great myths that has been perpetuated by real pro-gun groups. It was not
And
unusual
movies.
Western towns to ban guns within the city limits.
Yep.
I mean, just total, and that's a lot of it is too many people watching westerns.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Well, but at the
That's what
same
I would-
time, if you were to leave when you were to travel, that you would inevitably see guns. Mostly, I mean, almost certainly because people were hunting for survival. In that case, I mean, traveling between towns would not be a small undertaking. But I don't imagine that it would be uncommon to come across almost probably a good percentage of people carrying guns at that point, just outside of city limits.
yeah.
Do you think?
I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, I don't know either. Just speculating.
I think when you look at farmers and people like that, most of them, if they carried a gun, it was probably to shoot some varmint, that they thought was better. Other than that, they, for the most part, didn't carry guns if for no other reason. You didn't do a lot of shooting. Ammunition was expensive. So.
Oh, true that. Is the duel thing a real thing? Now I'm questioning all of Westerns. Did they do like the duels to like settle arguments?
They might have to some extent, but I'm not sure they did it to the extent that we see in TV shows and stuff. So,
My reality has been
I
shook.
mean, you watched Hamilton. Aaron Burr did kill Alexander Hamilton in a duel.
yeah.
I mean, it did happen.
Yeah.
That was
Oh, that really happened?
yeah, and that's an extension of old British common law, of the whole dueling culture thing. But that was serious business, not casual.
Casual.
Yeah,
Let's
like,
bring it outside.
Like you insulted my mom. We're gonna duel.
I feel like they would do that nowadays, though. Like
No comment.
I don't know if people are dumber or like they're just more handsy or fighting, or I don't know. Like I feel like my students would do that. I feel be like, take this outside. Get your weapon out. Here's my pencil. I had a kid stab another kid with a pencil the other day. You don't need guns. There's weapons everywhere. Like, if someone wants to hurt someone, they're going to hurt someone, right? I guess that their argument is they'll hurt a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a little bit harder to kill a large number of people with a knife than it is in an AR-15 with a 30-shot clip. So
totally. So I'm speaking from mass ignorance. So how does one get, this is not an educational video, by the way, how does one get such a weapon? Like, what are the steps you have to go through to get a weapon like that?
An AR-15 with a 30-shot clip, you just go to the local gun store and you buy it.
Really? No background check or anything?
I haven't bought a gun in years. If I remember correctly, you have to paper that basically says all sorts of dumb questions, like, have you ever plotted to overthrow the United States government? Are you taking drugs? Are you a felon? Yeah. And I can remember checking these off and looking at the guy and saying, if I was guilty of any of these things, I would lie and say no.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it depends. It depends a lot on the state too, because in Nevada, it wasn't mandatory, but after things started happening with the pandemic, their processing delays were huge. So it would actually take a week for you to get your hands on something, just because they had to process the background check. I don't know precisely what that involves, but that's about how long it took me to get my revolver.
Interesting.
Well, I think pistols are a little different.
Yeah.
With pistols, you have to do a background check. And again, I haven't bought a gun in a few years, and I don't pay that. But the last time I bought a rifle, which, it wasn't that long ago, it took me about 15 minutes to do whatever it was I had to do and walk out the door with my gun. So
interesting. I think that's a good point, because I don't think. Do you think that having a background check is infringing upon rights?
Oh, I don't think so. I think that the interpretation of the Second Amendment tends to be a little based on what people want, because it's a really poorly worded amendment, and so people are stretching it to support their, we want to be able to do this, and so therefore it means. I mean, when you think about the fact, it doesn't say guns; it says arms, and I've heard some interesting arguments about that, because after all, it's to protect yourself. And what if? Isn't that your favorite, right? What if your house is about to be strafed by a MiG-21 coming over from Russia? Should not have the right to own a surface-to-air missile. Or if there's a large horde of people coming to take your stuff, a small tactical nuke is not out of question. I mean, those are arms. So I just maybe silly,
that's
but
true.
Well, and it's very common in libertarian circles to make that argument that anything that the federal government has, that we should be allowed to obtain.
People should have.
And maybe I'm not going to speak for anybody here, despite my disagreements with that kind of broad thinking. But maybe state militias, if we kind of change the culture of how we think about things, and actually the states being more self-sufficient and having militias. Maybe state militias have more access
I
to.
think, yeah. See, I can really jump in. I thought that's what we called National Guard. So,
That's fair. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, that's true. Because those are state. They could just be called by federal government as well. They
so,
can be called by state or federal government. I had a question, but now I forgot it. Weapons. Aaron, if you have something, jump in.
Well, to address Savannah's comment here, background check is not required between two private parties for ARs. Generally, background checks are not required between two private parties for anything. You can sell drugs to people. It doesn't require a background check. As long as you do it in a dark alley, there's no regulation, I don't think.
well, I'm not sure. My school students used to say, if you don't get caught, it's not illegal. And I'm like, that's not a real logical, that's not a good question or a way to look
No,
at it.
it's still illegal. You just don't have consequences for it.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true either. You still have consequences, just not governmental consequences.
Yeah, it becomes a question of morality.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, that question fell out my brain.
If private sales of cars have to be registered, I'm not sure why private sales of guns aren't registered either. So,
Well, I mean, it's set up for that. I mean, you could take it into an FFL and have the whole thing done.
sure, but and of course the argument
Legitimately.
is, the standard argument, Second Amendment, and that's
Yeah.
so.
But it's not infringe upon your rights to own them. You still can own them. You just have to follow protocol.
Right.
I don't think that's unreasonable. So the whole thing, I think, and Aaron mentioned it before, is that, again, guns don't kill people. People kill people.
I didn't say
and
that. You
broken
said that.
people.
Just
No. I'm not. I'm going to your. I'm
Yeah,
going
but
to the next point.
Guns make it easier for people to kill people.
Yes. And it's broken people that kill people. So again, we're talking about a root cause issue. Making all these gun laws is not going to help a bunch of broken people who want to harm many other people. Like, they have thoughts to harm many other people. Yes, the gun would make it easier, and the easier it is to get the gun, the easier to see. But what if, just
That's
a novel idea,
It's a logical argument.
yeah,
And
what
logic
if
is
we
always true.
address the root issue? Like, why are our kids so broken? Why are our kids desire to do this? Perhaps, and this is where I usually lead, perhaps our educational system is broken, right? Perhaps our home structures are broken, right? Why don't we look at the root cause, and instead of putting all this fight and money into no guns, what if you put that same fight and money and energy into, let's take care of the emotional needs of our youth. Let's take care of, like, family structure. Let's be one and all, and, like, be there for each other. Kumbaya kind of crap. Put all your energy into that. And then
I agree 100% on that, but I also think that abundance of guns creates abundance of gun crimes. So, and statistically, and also even logically, one of the arguments of the real pro-gun people is that an armed society is a polite society, and if everybody's armed, there'll be no crime. Well, every year for the last several decades, the number of guns in our society has been increasing more and more and more. And interestingly enough, gun homicides have been increasing more and more. And I'm not sure, how you can continue with that logic that, if more guns creates less crime, then why is it that we're, having more gun homicides?
I think
That makes sense.
there's and I think the biggest issue with this whole argument, and I generally am an advocate for trying to look at different ways to have a specific conversation. We were talking about mental health. Population density, I don't think is helping any of it either. As we physically start to encroach on each other more than is really tolerable in cities, because you don't see a lot of this kind of behavior in rural areas, that all of this concentration of people in small areas is also a factor in the escalation of gun violence, I think.
See, I love to be the person who argues against somebody's point of views. A lot of that is almost statistical because, big cities have more homicides and crimes because they have more people. But if you look at it on a per capita basis, I'm not sure that holds up. If you have one murder in a town of 500 people, that might not happen again for 2 or 3 years, and you're thinking, oh, this is a safe place. But you go to New York City, and maybe one murder per 5,000. Well,
yeah,
that's a lot of murders because there's a lot of people in New York City.
Well, and I'll help you out here because I like doing the same thing as you do, so I'll do it to myself. It's kind of a self-fulfilling thing too, because you have that many people. There's no way to actually measure that and to have a metric because you don't have the confines, the space confines. You don't have traffic in rural areas. There are a lot of things that all of that physical encroachment just doesn't have to deal with when you talk about moving into rural areas.
The other thing to look at too is you have to almost separate this out. There's a difference between crimes and crimes involving both guns and especially gun homicides, because the actual crime rate in the United States has been dropping for the last several decades. Burglaries and all sorts of crimes like that, and even gun homicides dropped for a while, but now they've been rising again, and that could be COVID. It could be, the number of guns. There's probably more than one factor that's going on there, but I tend to look at other areas too. If you look at, population density, go to a European city with, almost nobody owning guns, and their population in many cases is just as dense, if not more so than ours. And oftentimes crime rates, and especially gun crimes, is, much, much, much lower.
Well, because they don't have guns. But I would be curious about violent crimes.
Yeah, most importantly,
they're not allowed.
They don't have. They also don't have Americans.
That's true too, because they're more polite. Not Americans. But they're not even allowed to have guns. Not even the police have guns, right?
Yeah, it depends on the country.
Okay.
Most notably in the UK, yeah, the police
UK.
don't carry firearms.
Yeah, which is crazy to me. That's crazy. But
patrol doesn't carry firearms. I don't know if.
But so much of it is cultural in the United States. In other countries where it's not part of their culture, they don't grab a gun, when the neighbor steps on their lawn. If somebody knocks on your door in the middle of the night looking for, directions, they don't automatically shoot half a dozen holes through the door, But
that's true.
And it's part of our culture, and it's not a static culture. I think it has become more and more of our culture, over time.
Why do you think that is?
Money. That I'm being facetious. I mean, that's a real quick answer. But the NRA has made millions of dollars from gun companies, so they have a financial interest in promoting gun ownership. And I think that, and this is from a hunter's perspective, the number of hunters in the United States has been dropping steadily. That means the sale of hunting rifles has also been dropping. And now the biggest source of income for a lot of these companies is what is basically assault rifles, but we're not supposed to call them that because, they're just really automatic rifles. But everybody knows what they are. And in fact, they even have a new category just for assault rifles. They're now called American sporting rifles.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Let's just rename it. That'll solve everything.
Right. And that's where the money is coming from for these big companies. So
I did about this on Instagram, and I got a couple responses. So
Oh no.
Self-defense and protection against those traumatized souls who seek vibration necessary as a Black woman. So like you said, when you said like they step on the lawn and your first instinct is to like shoot through doors, what do you think causes that culture? So the NRA is like buy guns, you need to protect yourself. So do you think it's like fear mongering?
Sure, exactly. I mean, that's I'm amazed at how many people, that's their first thing. Do I need a gun to protect myself? I'm and again, this is part of being a teacher. One of the things that I sort of believe in big time and work on in my own life even is the whole idea of risk management. What is really dangerous? I used to tell my kids, I said, it's dangerous to fly to Europe because you have to drive to the airport.
Yeah.
Yes. Legit.
And so a couple of months ago, I'm a volunteer and I do a lot of work with bicycle trails. And a woman asked me on Facebook if you're allowed to carry a gun on the trail. And being pretty naive about this at first, I said, well, yeah, I mean, during hunting season, we have no problem with hunters walking, out along our trails to go in the woods. She goes, no, I mean for self-protection. And I thought about it and I said, well, yeah, absolutely. But, you realize that your odds of needing a gun for self-protection are probably about 1 in a million.
Yep.
Your odds of shooting yourself when you fall off your bicycle with a loaded gun is about 1 in 1,000, which is 1,000 times greater. So,
see, I'm telling you, people, that's what would happen to me.
So,
I'm not even playing. Like, I would forget that safety or something.
Yeah. Well, I've been asked, my students said this, Mr. Bloom, do you carry a gun when you're walking in the woods? And I said, well, sure, in hunting season. They said, no, when you hike. And I thought about it, and they said, you could be attacked by a wild animal, or you could run into some guy that, was going to hurt you. And I thought, well, those are legitimate questions, and if I had a gun, it would, I could protect myself. But then I looked at the students and said, I have been hiking in the woods for 50 years. I have never once had had anything that would make me say, oh, I wish I had a gun right now. And I know from being a hunter and carrying a gun, you trip over a root, you fall on something, that gun could go off if you're not careful, and you end up shooting yourself or shooting a friend. And the odds of that occurring are much higher.
Yeah. Did that happen to real politicians, or is that a show I watched?
Are you talking about the Bush Cheney thing?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that-
What was it?
Is that a real thing?
Yeah, it wasn't Cheney, I think, shot somebody, not fatally, when they were, I don't know, hunting on a game farm. So.
Yeah, that makes me not want to hunt. I don't trust anyone, especially people like that.
Well, and to your point, especially in this country, there's not a lot to worry about. There's not a lot of grizzly country in the States, and even it could be argued that that's not even relevant. But being from the desert, it takes work and a lack of self-awareness to get bit by a snake. If there are rattlesnakes, it's very likely you're not going to get bit on accident. It's either you're off trail, you don't know what you're doing, you haven't done any reading, and the only reason to carry anything is if you're purposefully being irresponsible, because they will give you all the warnings because they don't want it any more than you do.
Yeah.
That's part of that fear mongering, and lots of people are so afraid. Why do you carry a gun? Well, what if I run into a rattlesnake? Well, if you see the rattlesnake, and if you have a gun, by the time you get to shoot it, you could step backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of.
And you're not going to hit, and the normal fool holstering a gun is not going to be able to hit a rattlesnake. I'm just saying.
Especially in a moment of stress.
Yeah, that's a very small target. These people don't understand. Like, They think they could just pull out and like
Oh yeah.
hit the crazy people. Have I told you my bear story, Aaron? Have I told that on the show? That when Ayla and I were hiking in bear country, they make you have a bear canister to put your food
Oh
in,
yeah.
and they give you a lecture about bears and at this particular trail, mountain lions too. So Ayla and I are hiking along, and Ayla goes, "Stop. I saw a bear." I was like, "Oh." Okay, so we step back. And I don't know what to do. I go to reach for the bear spray because we're required to carry bear spray too. Although I hear that it won't do anything. It just makes me feel better. And I look up, and this deer comes bouncing out, right? And I was like, oh, it's a deer, not a bear. And she goes, wait, there might still be a bear. It's like, if there's a deer there just chilling, there's no bear.
When
That's my bear
if there was a bear, it was a black bear. Like you still have to be like carrying the bear stuff, for keeping your food sealed
Yeah,
is a good idea just because they get curious, not because they're aggressive
that's
or
true.
or
That's
anything.
true.
It's just
I've seen
just
when
a
animals
layer of
attack.
safety.
This is
Oh my
the
God.
TV again. I'm just saying, I have seen when animals attack. It happens. I'm just saying, it happens.
This is why I advocate people swim with sharks.
To swim with sharks? Why? Because
Yeah.
then you can't carry a weapon.
Well, no, because sharks are terrifying. Like sharks are one of the big things that people are afraid of.
Uh-huh.
And then as soon as you do it, you realize, oh, it's overhyped. It's not that big of a deal. And then
Yeah.
you can take that through the rest of your life.
But
and
don't
apply
you
it to
don't
other
swim in a
things.
cage?
No.
Oh, you swim with actual sharks?
Well, I mean, you've dove with nurse sharks.
Yeah, nurse
Well,
sharks.
that's my point. And I mean, you're not
Oh.
gonna get attacked by sharks. Like sharks don't just attack.
Yeah.
Like
Unless they think you're a seal because you have flippers on.
usually on
Again.
the surface, and that's
That's what the TV told me. So
that's on the surface when there's confusion to be made through light.
do you think
Sharks are not dangerous
all this
people.
now, all this talk about television, Rick, do you think shows like Duck Dynasty bring a different light to weapons? I call them weapons because that's what they had us do in the military, but guns, I guess.
Yeah, I never watched much of Duck Dynasty. I thought it was pretty dumb, but you know.
It is dumb. I have
Yeah.
never watched it either. It just made me think of how TV changes the perspective, like the fear mongering. But I would think things like Duck Dynasty, even though yes, very stupid, would more normalize the fact that people are hunters. Because I don't think people understand. Like there's people who grew up in cities who don't understand that guns are a part of culture. Like the guns you use to hunt, it's a part of your culture, and that some people still drive pickup trucks with a gun hanging in the little back there to like a high school, and people are like, what, they're bringing a gun to high school? But it's like normal.
Sure. I mean, to me, it's normal to have. To me, it's normal to have a gun, but I don't show it off. I don't make a big fuss about it unless I've got one of my other hunter friends and I say, "Oh, wait till you see this nice gun that I just got." And I'm looking at it from more of a technical aspect, not from this. I can use this to protect myself or, anything. And I guess that I do think that TV has an effect on it. I know that I've heard psychologists and people say this isn't true, but it's hard for me to imagine after watching movie after movie where the good guys suddenly pull out all these fully automatic guns and they shoot all the bad guys and save the world, that people just don't start getting that attitude that, well, I should have a gun to save
Yeah.
myself, things like that. So just,
Psychology is paid off by Hollywood, BTW.
yeah, I just, it's got to have some effect. So
Absolutely. I think so for sure. Because look at me. I thought that there were duels and that people carried guns into every saloon back in the cowboy days. But clearly it's not a thing.
Well, to your point, yeah, it's a tool, right? So it's just like if you got a new hammer drill, if somebody comes over to you, some random person comes over to your house for dinner, you're not talking about the sweet new hammer drill you got. But if
Right.
your contractor buddy comes over, right, and you're having a conversation, it's like, oh, check out my sweet new hammer drill. It's no different
Right.
to have that context and not make it a part. Your life isn't focused around that tool.
Yeah.
Rick, what do you think is the main cause of? So I think all of this gun violence stuff is obviously brought to light by school shootings, I think, and made like that's what make people advocate and choose a side and be very like they are. I was gonna say offensive terms, but like that's what makes them do it. So in your opinion, have you had thoughts on school gun violence and what might be behind it?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty hard not to as a teacher. Yeah, that was.
Oh, I keep forgetting. And he's a teacher.
Yeah. I mean, and I know my kids think that more than I do. I think, you know, I again, that's part of my risk management philosophy, and I would ask kids, I say, you know, what's the most likely thing that could kill you at your age? And inevitably, half or more of my students would say, "Oh, school shooting." And I would say, "No, they're really rare, and you're actually more likely to die in a car accident than anything else." And I don't think they quite comprehended that. And so, but I've thought about that a lot. I have kids going to school. My grandkids are going. My kids have graduated now, but they teach at school, and I've got grandchildren, so I think about this. Um, and I don't think it's because they're crazy. I think they're angry, they're hurt, and then they're reflecting on that gun culture. You know, how do I take care of this anger and this hurt? Take out a gun, you know, make a name for yourself. So
Yeah, totally. My daughter, someone in her class was saying that they were going to shoot up the school. Like they were shooting school. And then I guess other kids were asking, like, are you serious? He's like, no, I'm serious. Don't come to school tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to shoot up the school. And so it was reported to the school district has their own police department. So it was reported to the police department. They went and got it. But I had to then decide, well, is she going to go to school the next day? And so coming from me, I'm like, okay, it's very unlikely. Like, first of all, they're aware of it, so now it's even more unlikely. But it was still unlikely to begin with. And so I just review, like, okay, let's say in the instance that this actually happens, like you need to make sure you do these things. Like this is how we don't run with our hands flaring in the air. We take the practical steps. And I think that's why it makes me wonder if those drills that we do like school shooting drills, we do all kinds of drills. It might put the fear in them versus, like, I don't know what's more beneficial. Is it good to do these drills, or does it make them more fearful for no reason?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know. I'm not sure that the drills are going to reduce school shootings. I and I'm not sure that kids are going to remember all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, they might. You never know. They surprise you, but yeah, I think that's my real problem with gun culture is that we've created a situation where, I mean, those kinds of stresses on kids have been around for a long time, but now with all the guns on that you can get, and it's not that you can get them easily. We used to be able to get guns easier 30, 40, 50 years ago than you can now. It's that whole idea of having these guns and using them to settle scores, to show people that that you're important, things like that. I think those are part of the culture that wasn't common 50 years ago. They were just tools then. So.
50 years ago, do you think there was such a desire for, I feel there's a real desire for power and to show that, I'm more powerful than you versus a working together thing. Was that the case?
Yeah, and I'm not sure where that came from, but I think that, in the past there, and again, this may be my view, but I think there was more of a, we need to work together. Um, a lot of it was people were on a much more equal basis. Everybody was the same, living in some small town and things like that. And now you get to see flashy, important people on TV all the time, and I think it really gives people this sense of, helplessness or lack of power, maybe is a better term. So.
Well, and
Yeah, I go
well,
ahead.
without, I mean, and we're eventually we're gonna do our whole war on poverty episode and adversarial nature and stuff. But the social media culture, as we've developed, like we all experience, and everybody talks about the midlife crisis. But kids have these things too that they have to deal with, and when you're exposed to successful people exclusively because those are the people who brag about themselves on social media, that those existential crises are becoming more front and center and more severe and causing more of those, like, what do I do? Like, how are people going to remember me?
Right.
Yeah, and the anger you talked about, it makes people angry that somebody else has so much more. Why don't I have that? Like, why am I not in that position? And I feel like that can cause a lot of the anger as well and frustration.
Yeah, and you're under a lot of pressure. I mean, these kids are under pressure, a lot of it from social media, and the culture, and it's hard on them. I mean, there's been stuff like school shootings for a long time. If you look at the history of it, there's been bombings, there's been school shootings. Again, 40, 50 years ago. It's just that they weren't as common. Wasn't the culture was different. So.
Well, there was a bomb threat in my high school. One of our teachers had an incident. One of my teachers who ended up having to deal with that whole situation had called in a bomb threat to the school. So it wasn't
the teacher called one in.
The teacher called one in.
That's funny. Well, I mean, it's not like funny, but sorry.
Well, but it's, I mean, it over time, like and it's like, it's not just like the existential crises. Like, these are all normal human things that we all have experienced.
Dude, I had bomb
we just
threats.
Don't focus on them.
We had bomb threats like every other week, legit. Because I went to a 6th grade center out in Northtown, and we would sit out on the curb for at least an hour, at least once a week or once every couple weeks, because someone took off school and called in a bomb threat, and they'd have to have a dog check every locker. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
TC said
there for a while.
Yeah. Like, and where are these kids getting the bomb? Like, you don't have a bomb. Shut up. Like, what? A bomb that you have on a timer too? Like, I could see maybe you like
a pipe bomb
creating some kind of like, pipe bomb. You don't have a bomb on a timer. You live around the corner in the project. Shut up.
Well, I remember the Anarchist Cookbook was a very popular thing when I was in school, and kids talked about the Anarchist Cookbook and stuff. So they had bomb making ideas.
Bomb making? Oh, really?
And it's almost the same thing. It's a sort of a power thing. If you can make a bomb, that's makes you cool.
Yeah.
Stuff and.
How come it doesn't make you cool to just be a nice guy?
Yeah.
You have to do that too with it, or you're not really a nice guy. You gotta be like, I'm a nice guy. Wow, you're so cool. Let's make it cool. I'm telling you. I think I told the show last week. This kid I taught 4th grade, and this kid was caught plotting to kill me, like with a map and everything. Like, he was caught plotting to kill me. This was my first year
map
teaching.
Of what?
A map of the school and where they were going to stand and where they were going to shoot me. Okay. Yeah. Then he brought a bullet to school the next week. Then the police were sent to his house where his grandfather's gun collection was confiscated. And then they were like, my husband at the time was like, they need to get him out of your classroom. Like, he needs to be not in your class. I had to keep him in my class because his mental health required stability. And so we had to keep it a stable situation. Like, he wants to kill me, like with a gun that he owns. Yeah.
That's a lot of really complicated series of things.
Yeah. Right? And TC said they had riots in their days. What do you think what is that? Like riots? Like how?
I don't remember riots. So,
You didn't have riots?
no.
TC, you have to tell us more about that. Like, I can't imagine a riot. Oh, like I can imagine like Black Lives Matter riot,
You get
but like
protests.
not a
Protests.
riot.
Yeah.
Yeah, nowadays they just steal all the things in the bathrooms,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I heard that one. So that's
which
the new
makes
one.
no sense because it's your bathroom, doofus heads. Like, this is the bathroom you have to use, not the adults. They have their own bathroom. Like, oh, TC said she was raised in Chicago, so they probably had riots in the city.
Yeah, Chicago's
That's
definitely an outlier when it comes to anything that we're talking about. I think gun violence and
That's
gang
true.
culture and drugs and all
And
of
again,
that, all
'cause
the
it's a
disparity
city.
stuff or all the desperation stuff.
Yeah. Katie says devious licks. What the heck is that?
Oh, that's the
What?
Oh,
yeah, that's the TikTok thing where kids are going in and trashing bathrooms and video in it and putting it on TikTok. And I can't remember the full name, but something like
that's what it's called, devious licks. Yeah, because it was I thought it
Devious
at
lick.
first.
Yep.
I
Devious
thought it
lick.
was something about like licking a bathroom. Did you know in October? Did you see the calendar? What it says they're supposed to do for each month? It says September is to destroy the bathroom. October is to slap a staff member. I was like, bring it. Bring it. Do it. Let's make this happen.
You need a body
people.
cam just in case this really happens.
See, there's where you could, have the other end of the spectrum. You could be those armed teachers say, "Go ahead, make my day."
So
Yeah,
what
no.
do you? I mean, it seems obvious, a little bit obvious at this point, but because it seems like it's overboard to me, and I'm not there. But the movement that had started a couple years back to arm teachers, is that as incredibly unreasonable as I think it is?
Yeah, it's a incredibly dumb
Okay.
idea, because trained police sometimes have a hard time hitting the bad guy, and let alone some. I could just see my French teacher with a, actually Spanish teacher with a gun. That wasn't going to happen. So, and then of course teachers being so organized, you're going to open up your drawer and go, "Oh, what happened to my 45? I know I left it here somewhere." So I mean.
Oh my God, that makes me feel so much better about myself. I would definitely lose my 45. That would definitely happen. And I know which kid would have stole it too, just so you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Imagine teacher. I know teachers, and as much as I love them, they should not be holding weapons on the daily.
No. So.
Yeah, very dumb idea. But we have school police officers for the district, and I believe they're armed. I'm almost positive they're armed.
And so
But
when my father was young, he would take guns to school. He wouldn't take them into school, but he would have them out in his car. And then after school, other guys would come out and they would buy or trade guns. My dad was always a horse trader, and so he would buy and sell guns in the school parking lot. So,
Oh my gosh,
Wow.
that is so interesting.
well, I know at Penn State, the forestry fraternity. Had I known this, I probably would have joined that fraternity. But they were almost all hunters, and when you went in the front door of the fraternity, they had a great big gun rack, and it was locked, and everybody, had. I'm not sure if it was individual guns were locked or how it worked, but yeah, you just you could have a gun in your frat house. You just had to have it locked in the gun cabinet with everybody else's. So, and then after classes, you'd go get your gun out and drive out to somebody's farm and go hunting for the afternoon. So
That is so interesting. Oh, fun fact, I was a forestry major for one term. Yeah.
That's it. Just in a
learned.
vacuum.
That's it. I learned I learned that you were just supposed to learn what trees to cut down. And I was like, wait a minute. I just wanted to be a forest ranger and teach everyone about all of the plants. They're like, that's not what we do here, ma'am. I was like, okay. Let me go just be a teacher instead. I don't understand. Steven says you lost your 45 in a boating accident.
That's another libertarian thing to evade enforcement. You lost all your guns in a boating accident.
Oh, okay.
Another radical thing. That may not specifically be a libertarian thing like some of the other stuff, but
that's why I'm not a libertarian. Too many of their ideas end up going to their I always call this their logical ideas end up being illogically extreme. So I always tell libertarian friends you should protest government intervention.
Yep.
Refuse to drive on any highway where land may have been taken by eminent domain.
Yeah, I support that.
So,
I think there's a balance. There should be a balance.
Yeah.
Well, it's the fundamental problem with political parties in general is that you're going to end up disagreeing on some points. So just have your principles and vote on your principles. And I mean, there may be a place for political parties as far as organization goes, but have your own principles. Don't base them on the principles of a political party.
Of an entire party.
Right.
Craziness. That's crazy. I always say, like, you're a hardcore Republican. You believe in everything. Like, you happen to believe every single thing that this group of old white guys says. Like, that really.
Hey, watch. I'm an old white guy.
I'm just saying. You believe everything this homogeneous group of people, right? This homogeneous group of people believe this thing, and you believe the exact same thing as them. Shut up. I say the same thing about, like, religion, though. Like, you're a hardcore Christian. You believe everything that comes out of it. Like, how can that possibly be? You just believe it because they say it. So go forth and hate me. Go forth with April hate. I'm just saying.
It's easier to be spoon-fed your beliefs than to critically consider them. And a lot of things aren't worth people's time. A lot of people have a lot of stress at work, and they come home to stress with family, and they don't have time
Maslow's
for
hierarchy of needs.
And that's why you get mailers that say straight ticket vote. Like, vote for all the Democrat candidates or vote for all the Republican candidates. Because people are susceptible to that because they don't have time or energy, which is
Trust me, I'm a teacher,
and
dude.
why people don't vote in local elections, which is a crime in itself.
Yeah, I could be arrested then because I don't know if you've ever taught Aaron, but
I have taught Aaron.
Whew.
I do it a lot.
I was an assistant principal, and I came home and I could still be a like normal, rational human being. Like, it was a lot of work, but it was okay. I went back to teaching, and guys, dude, I cannot function. Like, you guys are lucky I'm here speaking. Like, it takes every ounce of your physical and mental power to show up. Oh, Teeth, I didn't mean just Republicans. Teeth says all Republicans are not the large white male. First of all, I never said large. I don't know where you got that from.
This was not supposed to be a political episode.
I meant typical politicians are old and white. Jacob says that's true. There are also large white females.
Oh, man. It's getting out of hand now.
They're not large. Are they?
Well, and TC brought up, just to go back for just a second, because I wanted to touch on this.
Oh, sorry.
That TC said the Japanese kids stay after school to clean the bathrooms.
That's legit. And do you know that we aren't allowed to use cleaning as a punishment?
Really?
I did not know that.
I don't know. No, we can't use cleaning as a punishment.
I can't use it. I thought you could. I'm like, yeah, no. Yeah, no. Yeah.
We cannot make them clean as a punishment. All I can do is request and bat my eyelashes, I guess. I don't know.
Stewardship
clean
is a
up
big
that-
deal, and I feel like it's one of those things that's not focused on enough.
And it could be connected to this whole I don't give a crap about anything.
Because if you don't feel connected to a community, it'd be much easier to commit violence against it.
Sure.
Legit. Look at that. If we had kids clean the schools, there would be no school shootings. We have solved everything by the end of the episode.
Always the short line here.
We're so good. We got skills upon skills.
But here we are at 9:00, so we'll wrap up here. Rick, we appreciate you coming on.
It was great fun.
It was enlightening to have a conversation with somebody who's not dogmatic first about the subject, because it's kind of a hard thing to find.
And who knows something.
Yeah. Are we?
After 71 years, you start to accumulate some things, you know.
I think
Thank
next week, are we off?
Next week I'm off.
Oh, are we doing experimental stuff next week?
I don't know. That's on you, dude. Guys, they're keeping me at work. I told them Wednesdays I have very important commitment. They're like, we don't care. That's what happened.
So there's a chance we'll be off, but there's also a chance that we're gonna have
Aaron will
a
feel swirly.
very interesting untamed adventure, because I won't have any balance. I need to find some
I think-
balance.
You need to sit by a fire with like a drink and be like, right? That's a movie or something or a show. You need to drink and you need to share the musings of Aaron. Welcome to the musings of Aaron.
I'll go buy a bottle of cognac just for the occasion.
Yes.
But thanks everybody for joining us. Please like, share, subscribe, do all the things below. Get more people in here asking questions so we can, fill in those gaps that we're missing, because we're not perfect. We can't think of everything.
Aaron's.
What?
Speak for yourself. Go ahead. Sorry.
We appreciate y'all. So come back next week, where there will be some interesting stuff. And until then, have meaningful conversations.